Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Built by BIPOC. My name is Carissa Begonia. I am a business coach for BIPOC entrepreneurs, a LinkedIn expert and top voice. I'm also a second generation Filipino American daughter of immigrants and the first and only in my family to start my own business. I truly believe that entrepreneurship is the path to equity and that life design is liberation. And at Conscious Exchange, we're creating an ecosystem and a movement of BIPOC entrepreneurs who have this same shared mission of being able to achieve time, location, financial, and occupational freedom for themselves, their families, and their communities. So I started Built by BIPOC because I was just really sick and tired of hearing that there isn't enough BIPOC talent out there, right? And I'm also kind of tired of being the first, the only, the other in spaces that I tend to find myself in, both in corporate America and in entrepreneurship. So here on this show, I highlight the journeys and the practices of my fellow BIPOC entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, creators, service providers, all who are just creating and building their own tables, creating new pathways for work, and defining success on their own terms. And I am so excited to introduce you all today to my client, my friend, Vanity Jenkins. Hey, Vanity.
Hey, Carissa, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Well, for all of you, Vanity is a DEI consultant and executive coach. She's the founder and principal consultant of Shifted Consulting. She created an organization with the vision of abolishing racism and anti-blackness from organizations across America. So super excited, Vanity, to have you just join, share some of your wisdom with everybody. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Carissa.
You're welcome. Well, why don't we just kind of start there? Like, why don't we start with, hey, like sharing a little bit more about yourself with the audience? Who do you serve? How you help folks?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Carissa mentioned, I am a DEI consultant and coach. I primarily coach women of color, really helping them learn how to access authenticity for them, both professionally and personally. As Carissa mentioned in her opening, oftentimes BIPOC folks and BIPOC women in particular, we have to put on so many layers before we go out into the world generally. So we have to put on layers when we know we're going home to visit our parents, and we have to put on layers when we go to work. And sometimes we have to put on layers around our siblings or even our friends. And I really want to create a world where we don't have to do that and we can just show up in our true and beautiful authenticity at all times. So that is probably my favorite part of the work I do, being able to work with women of color in particular. I do also coach everyone. So I coach men as well. I coach white folks as well. And really there, it is about unlearning the systems of oppression that are kind of global, as well as on an individual level, thinking through how can I be more equitable? How can I put on this equity lens so that women of color, who are often the most marginalized, don't have to keep fighting everybody, so that they can have some true allies in the workplace. I also help organizations really embed DEI into their strategic planning. Post 2020, everybody had a DEI statement, right? And unfortunately, we have not seen those statements materialize into actionable change in the experiences that people of color are having in the workplace. And so I help organizations really understand, one, how is inequity showing up at your specific workplace and your work environment? What are the tangible things that we can look at from a data perspective in terms of how inequity is showing up here? And then how can we cultivate a 3 to 5 year plan to address and change those same things from happening in the future?
I love it. I know I've been working with you a little bit, Vanity, on some like from one-on-one coaching and such, and then like a group program like around specifically on sales. And I think my experience of you has been like such a brightness and just like I know what I'm doing. Like I am committed to this. I am very clear on my mission, and how I operate in the world. And I don't know, I appreciate that. I think, of you, of just how confident you are always like, I work through this route. And there's a kindness and a gentleness that I
Mhm.
imagine as you kind of even help your clients, that both of those qualities come out. It's like, we're going to get to the root and we're going to figure these things out and we're going to be direct, but also, hey, what's up? How are you doing?
Yes, yes, absolutely. A lot of times people think DEI work is this big, scary thing. And I like to normalize the fact that there is almost no organization that is operating in, complete fidelity of their DEI goals, right? And so before you can make changes, you have to sit with that honestly and say, like, yes, we are messing up here. People are having a very different experience here. And there are policies that are creating that different experience. And so I like to just really normalize that because it's the truth, right? Like there's so much data that we can look at that will show that that is the truth. And people have to be able to accept that before you can actually make strategic changes. And so I like to normalize that with my clients and, let them know that although this has been the story, it doesn't have to be your story forever. And you can make changes today that will have a ripple effect and implications on people you work with for a very long time in the future. And so like to normalize the both and.
Yeah. Well, so I want to go with a little understanding a little bit more about your thoughts around coaching and in consulting, right? But you work with a lot of different folks at different stages of their awareness, maybe, and their commitments or comfortability with equity conversations. But so just more generally, like what's your perspective on coaching? What is your maybe philosophies? And what do you really look for when you're either working with a coach for yourself or when you're even looking at vetting clients and such and choosing
Mhm.
who starting your own clients?
Yeah, so I'll start with for myself. When I'm looking for a coach, having aligned values is incredibly important to me. And so before I decided to be a full-time business owner, I knew I was going to need a coach, right?
Mhm.
And it was challenging for me to find a coach that had an equity mindset. One of the things that I have found is that, being a business owner and the close connection to capitalism can push people to behave in ways that are not aligned to what I think is important, right? And so that's one of the things that I am constantly trying to live in the both and of, right? I am a business owner. I have to make money to take care of myself, my daughter, et cetera. And I don't want to fall into capitalistic patterns where, I'm paying people minimum wage or even paying people market rate. Like I remember having a debate about this when I was kind of early on and as an entrepreneur, and someone was saying, well, you can just pay them market rate and, that'll be great. And I'm like, the market itself is inequitable. I don't want to pay people market rate. I want to be able to pay people in a really equitable manner. And so finding someone who is values aligned as a coach, especially a business coach, was something that was incredibly important to me. And really what led me to you, knowing that you were a former DEI consultant, just seeing some of the work that you've done with BIPOC entrepreneurs, hearing how you talk about conscious selling instead of, just selling anything to anybody. Those were things that were all very important for me as I was looking for a coach. And then I would say for other people, when you are looking for a coach, one of the things that you need to be really clear on is what are you hoping you and the coach can do together? And so are you looking for someone who can push you to the next level? Are you looking for career coaching? Are you looking to really find a coach who can help you make sense of what's happening in your work environment or in your personal environment? Are you looking for a coach that can help you go deeper in terms of DEI? I like to also share with clients that, DEI is a cyclical process. And so there's never an endpoint. You're not going to be the, champion DEI person someday because there's always more layers and more things that you can question and interrogate and more ways that you can become more equitable. I often start with race because race is one of the most defining things in American culture. But, there is gender equity, there is LGBTQ, there is, so many things happening with trans individuals right now in our country. There's religion, we've seen what's happening with our Muslim brothers and sisters while the genocide is happening in Palestine. There's always more that you can do in terms of equity. There's never going to be a point where you have just, arrived as the equity person. And so if you want a coach to help you really navigate and unpack and dig deeper, that's something, that you're going to need to know on the front end. And so I would say, one, be really clear on what you're looking for a coach for. I would also say something that needs to be normalized more in our culture is needing coaches. Everybody needs a coach, in my opinion. You need someone to help you figure out how to be better. We all want to be better, and it can be lonely trying to get better by yourself without having someone to hold you accountable, without having someone hold up that mirror for you. And so would definitely say we all need coaches. A lot of times when I'm talking to more junior staff, it feels like, well, I can't, there's no money in the budget for me to have a coach. And I remind them that, I was in the C-suite. And so I've seen lots of budgets, and almost every C-suite leader at every Fortune 500 company has some type of coach. And often those coaches are charging, $15,000, $20,000 a quarter or more, right? And so having people kind of reframe their mindset around affordability and budgeting, I think is something that is also important, because we see again how hierarchies, who is allowed to have access to professional development, who is allowed to continue growing and developing, and who doesn't have access to those things. And so those are questions that I also pose, to organizations that I'm working with. If the C-suite has an unlimited amount of professional development funds, how are you making sure that the rest of the organization can also receive professional development, because it is something that we all need.
Yeah. I thank you for normalizing that, or bringing that topic up, because one, I think sometimes the access to coaching is just not, you're not aware of it, right? People don't realize that these professional development budgets are allocated already to these executives, right? And so, or even to some senior leaders, and it's maybe just, you haven't asked because they didn't tell you, right? More of these inequitable kind of models and such, right? Like only certain people know. And so thanks for just pointing that out. It's kind of amazing to me. I think coaching is becoming a little bit more normalized as a role, or as a yeah, just as a career even, right? Versus even 3 years ago or 5 years
Right.
ago, and it's more acceptable, like that we can ask for that, or we want that. I know when I first started, there's a little bit of shame. I'm like, I'm a coach, like, right? I've left my career, climbing the ladder to
Right.
become, a coach over here, right? Like, is that okay? Right. But now I'm like, yeah, I'm a business coach, and I'm a damn good one. And I'm just like, I have a mission. I'm trying to have more people of color start their own businesses and leave corporate America. But the idea of that, am I allowed to have this, is one. And then the other one is like, I didn't even know this is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or that removing also that shame to like that, why I don't need help. I'm like, yeah, we do.
Right.
You
Right.
know, like you're in corporate America, right? Like you
Right.
had mentors and sponsors and maybe an actual coach for, depending on your seniority, right? But of all of a sudden in business, you're like, no, we don't need guidance. So we
Right.
can
Right.
figure this out on our own. No, you can't. Or you can. And why make it so much harder, right? Why not learn from other folks who have been where you are, looking, are ahead, that can teach you things so that you can get there faster too, right? Or with more ease. So I appreciate you saying it's okay. Go, like, coaching is needed. Everyone should have it.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. And I do think I loved your question of what do you look for? Because I've had two terrible coaches in my life as, an executive, and one was a Black man and one was a white woman. And so that is another reason why I really focus on coaching women of color, because, my coach, who was a Black man, told me that I needed to learn how to dim my light around our executive, right? And I'm sitting there like, is this what you're supposed to be telling me? I don't think this is how coaching works. And the white woman that I had told me that I needed to learn how to not be so pessimistic about the world around us. And I was like, well, there's a lot of racism here in South Carolina, so I don't know
Like
what you want
my
me to
reality, you mean?
do. And so it is really important to make sure that you find a values aligned coach, because in both of those examples, I had diverse coaches, right? But they were not aligned to the way that I wanted to grow and the way that I want to see my values lived out in the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's important to distinguish, right? Because, sometimes we're like, oh my God, I just want to find someone who looks like me, right? And I do think representation is important, but it's also not the end all be all because of that, right? Things like, yeah, we might have a shared identity as a woman or as women of color, say, but are we values aligned?
Right.
That's more the thing that we need to be checking for. And I just want to thank you for even, working with other DEI consultants and coaches. It definitely checks me because it makes me think about more liberatory models too, and just reminding myself like, yes, this capitalist thing is going to keep running. And how do we keep, trying to challenge that, which sometimes is harder as an entrepreneur, because one, we're just modeling sometimes business models that we just see been in, that we've
Yep.
seen, it's been ingrained in us for centuries, right? This is the way. And we're having to undo some of that. And now we're the sole decision makers, and we're the parameters to play with. And,
Right.
and so and yeah, we're allowed to, you know, completely like reimagine and design things, but sometimes we still need that permission
Right.
to
Right.
do so, right? Like for ourselves. How has that been for you as, moving from corporate or moving from organizations,
Mhm.
not too long ago, right? Into being a
Mhm.
full-blown entrepreneur on your own, like full-time entrepreneur.
Yeah. So one, I would not have done it if it wasn't for working with you. Like I was very much I want a steady check. I need health insurance. I'm a single mom. And I'll have a business on the side, right? Like I had a business on the side for 2 or 3 years before I went full time. And I had to be pushed and pushed and pushed by the universe, by trusted colleagues. I'm also, very spiritual. So I felt like God was pushing me as well. And even with all of those pushes, I was saying like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm still going to get a job. Like, no, I want to go get a job first. Because one of the things that is also important to me is, having some level of consistency and, being able to take care of myself and my family. I'm the oldest, first and only business owner in my family. I'm the oldest daughter. And so I've always had just a lot of pressure, oldest grandchild, grandma's favorite, like all of those things, right? Which has required me to take care of family in different situations, to be the one that people go to be the one that always has it together, right? Like that was me. That's why I climbed the corporate ladder so quickly and, became a part of the C-suite. And so in my vision for my life, I never saw myself being a full-time business owner. It was always going to be something that was on the side for me. And it wasn't until I was able to see not only was it possible, but how freeing it also was. And, I think sometimes we think about the work, and I came from the nonprofit, so not corporate, but I did a lot of work in different nonprofits. And so, very mission aligned work, right? And so we see we think about ourselves as, well, if I'm not there, what's going to happen? And if I'm not the one there fighting for equity, what's going to happen to everybody else? And so we have a bit of a savior complex often when we're in nonprofit spaces in particular. I also had hired incredibly wonderful teams who were almost always 80 to 100% women of color. And so knew the ways that I protected my teams from other things that was happening at the organization. And so again, felt a sense of responsibility. And then, healthcare in America is very ghetto. And so just having to think about having to take care of the health insurance for me and my daughter felt like, well, even if I make what I made working, I'm going to have to make, double that, because health insurance is just crazy. And, I'm being facetious. It's not double, but just the thought of having to pay for health insurance was daunting. And so I didn't want to do it. And I resisted it even as I was being pushed for a long time. But ultimately, I think that I have found so much freedom and liberation in being a business owner and being able to think about my time, being able to pick and choose who I work with, right? Like not having to work with everybody, and that being okay, being able to see very clearly what quarters I may need to, make some additional money, what quarters I have a surplus, and really plan my year around that. And the numbers part was probably what scared me the most, because in my head, the numbers were just never going to align, right? Like I'm just never going to make enough money. And, being able to sit down with you and really look at it and say, well, actually, this is pretty easy. Like I can work way less than I have ever worked in my life and make about the same and be comfortable and happy.
Yeah.
There was just so much freedom in that because I don't think I ever conceptualized being able to take care of myself and being and that being easy. My parents are both still working. I'm trying to, tell my mom, yeah, you can retire. Like it'll be okay. I can help you start a business if you want, right? Now it just seems easy. But yeah, my grandma just stopped working. Like she retired many years ago, but they have this program for elders, and she was still working 3 or 4 hours a day at 82. And I'm just like, that I'd never want that to be me. Like I want to be done with work as early as I can, like finito, completely done. Um, and that would not have been possible at all if I didn't take the leap and go into entrepreneurship full time. And for a long time, I was just adamantly against it because of how much I value just consistency, knowing that a check is coming. But I think what so many of us have seen, especially in the last couple of years, that jobs aren't even consistent necessarily with the mass layoffs that we've been seeing. And so many of those layoffs are just a product of capitalism, right? Like Netflix and these huge companies, Google laying off people, YouTube, y'all actually have money. You don't have to lay off people, but you can because are a part of this system that thrives on people being desperate. And so you can, reorder things when you want to. And I think that also is just an additional layer of toxicity that we didn't really see before COVID, with how organizations really do not value us beyond what we can produce. And so definitely have found a lot of freedom in that part as well. Now, I kind of went all over the place. I don't remember if I answered your question. So if I
You
did it,
did.
I'm happy to go back.
No, it's I love where your brain goes in all the different places too. I think that's a lot of this DI folks it's all over.
Yes, yes,
There's so many things, like complex things that we're thinking about too. And sometimes people don't realize how much is spinning in here,
yep,
and how much even to even communicate what we want to communicate, right? So
right.
no worries, I love it. I'm tracking with you.
Okay.
Curious then, was there like a moment where you're like, we gotta go? Like, was there, knowing that you needed some of that safety and security or and consistency, is
Mhm.
there like a kind of a few moments that were like, yeah, we can take this side hustle and actually turn this into a full-time thing?
Yeah, so it was actually, I was going through the job search process, and I also am a career coach, right? So I know how to do a job search. I help people get jobs all the time. And as I was going through the job search, there was not one job that I was excited about. I was like, yeah, I can do this, but I don't want to do it. Or, yeah, I can do this, but it seems like torture. I'm gonna hate doing this every day. So that was a part of it. And then the real impetus was I made it to the final round of a job that I was well overqualified for. Just could have done the job in my sleep. And so in my head, I'm like, oh, well, this is perfect because then I can build up my business and then leave at the end of the year. Because I was still very much in that phase of not being ready. And I didn't get it. And I was like, there is no way that I should not have gotten this job. Like this job was literally created for me 5 years ago and I didn't get it. And I felt like that was again a moment where God was really showing me, if I let you get this job, you're never going to do it. And so after that, I said, you know what? I'm not applying for anything else. And I'm just kind of trusting what will happen. So I made that happened on like a Thursday or Friday. I made the announcement to my email community on that Wednesday that I was going full time. And I literally found you for the first time that Thursday. So I was like, oh, well, here's a coach. She seems aligned. Let me follow her a little bit more. But it literally happened like clockwork. Things just started falling into place after I made the decision to do what everybody had been telling me to do for months, that I was resisting.
I'm glad we found each other. You on the LinkedIn streets, I'm guessing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because yeah, it's again, it's just been such a joy to work with you. Would love to hear as now, what are you, a year plus in? What have been some of the biggest highlights or just success stories for you, wins, that you've experienced now? Yeah.
Yeah, I think one is getting more comfortable in pricing. I think as a Black woman in particular, we don't really know how to charge our worth, right? What is your worth? How much time is an hour worth? And when I've gotten feedback about my prices being too low, or, people sharing with me, like, you should really up this, in the back of my head, I'm like, but can I? Like, who's gonna pay for this? And this year has just been a confirmation of so many things. I have multiple clients on retainer right now, which is something that I didn't even a year ago, if you would have said, hey, you should just put some clients on retainer, I would be like, who's going to pay for that? Nobody's going to pay just to talk to me if they need to. But that is not the case. I have, multiple clients on retainer, which just gives another level of that stability that I was talking about. The way I've designed my retainer contracts is they have to happen quarterly. And so, I have companies re-upping for retainers, and I'm like, I 2 years ago, a year ago, I never would have thought that would have been possible. And so I think the confidence that you talked about in the beginning, this is very new, right? Like last year, the confidence as a business owner was not there. Confidence in a lot of other things, yes, of course, but as a business owner, it was not there. But now I feel like everything's going to be okay, and everything has been okay. And so there's just another level of confidence that I do have now as a business owner. But more importantly, I would say the work that I've got to do with organizations and people I coach, I have started to see the way that organizations are changing and shifting because of the work with me. And so usually when I'm working with the organization, of course, I'm not working with everybody, because I'm working with, companies usually to 300 to 500 staff members. And so I'll have random staff members that I'm not working with at the organization email me and thank me for the work that I'm doing, or email me and try to find some time to connect, to ask me some more questions about what's happening. And I love that, because I'm like, okay, this work isn't just staying in this little bubble with the people that I'm working with. Other people who I've never met at the organization know my name and want to ask me questions and want to say thank you for the changes that they do see. And so ultimately, the work isn't about me. It's not about, how much money I can make. It's really about creating the system so that all people can thrive. And so I love that. And then with my beautiful women of color that I coach, the amount of times that I'll get a text message saying like, I said no to that committee. I don't have capacity. They need to find somebody else to do it. Or, I'm applying for new roles that are more values aligned. Or just I'm taking off and I'm taking email and Slack off my phone while I'm on vacation. Just the boundaries that people are able to create for themselves so that they can thrive and be successful. I love hearing that from my clients all the time.
Yeah, those I know, even in the programs with like the sales program, for example, whenever we got like your text or something, or like happy dances, or we the coach, we love what's we seeing all
Yep.
the celebrations happening along the way. That's what maybe we do this for, right? Is to see
Yep.
like people are actually, things are changing, and the
Yep.
ripple of impact that has when, for me, for you, when you're able to thrive and do well, right? And then all the clients that you are working with and they're able to thrive and do things and set their boundaries or pursue things that values aligned organizations, etc. That's, I don't know, at least I know that's why I do what I do
Right.
it.
Right.
What has been maybe some of your, what are you most proud of, again, I guess, as for yourself as an entrepreneur now?
It is definitely seeing the way my daughter talks about me being a business owner. She wants to be a business owner already at 9. She has her plan. I can't talk about the plan 'cause she's like, I don't want anybody to steal it. I'm like, I got you. Lips
Got to
unlocked.
keep that IP in.
Yes.
Women of color, protect your IP.
Right, right. But she has a really great idea. Like, I am so proud of what she's already thinking about at 9. I'm like, this is amazing. And I never would have thought about owning a business at that age. I didn't want to think about it when it was accessible to me. I was like, no, still don't want to, not for me. And, now I'm in a place where I'm thinking really thoughtfully about expanding and hiring people full time and what I want, salaries to look like and benefits and all of those things. So I would say that those two are probably the things that I'm most confident about, seeing myself as a business owner and not a solopreneur, because that is like, that was my plan forever, because it was just going to be a side thing, to, pay for vacations, pay off debt, but that was
You a
it.
CEO. You're a
Yes, yes.
CEO.
And so, thinking about what I want my company to look like, what I want the experience to be for people that I hire full time, those are the two things that I would say I'm most proud of.
That's amazing. I didn't even realize that that's where you were at this point, thinking about the future ahead. It's like it's not solopreneurship anymore. And
Right.
it was went from side hustle to solopreneur to like, no, we're gonna start our company
Yep.
and have employees and all the things, right? And I love hearing that. That's amazing. Well, Vanity, I do talk about a lot about LinkedIn because that is what my preferred channel or platform of choice. Any kind of, and that I definitely love teaching all the ways we can use LinkedIn to amplify our work, be more visible. Any highlights around, maybe your experience with LinkedIn specifically?
Yeah, so I am a top voice now, thanks to some coaching from Carissa, top voice in leadership development coaching, which was super exciting for me. And I think LinkedIn is just such an underused tool. I know that I used to, probably a year ago, I used to hate LinkedIn, right? Because it was like you would just get these random stories of like, I had a flat tire, my dog died, but I still showed up for the interview and then I got the job. And you're just like, what? Like, what does all of this have to do with anything? But I've noticed after I did a cleanup of my LinkedIn list to make sure that I'm actually following people whose content I want to digest and whose content people I can learn from, people I can grow with. That has definitely changed LinkedIn for me, but also the content that I'm putting out is a lot different. And so it's a combination of both sharing very real and personal stories about things that have happened to me in childhood and as a professional and how that impacts my work as a DEI consultant, as well as being able to engage with people on a new platform. I do a monthly lunch and learn. I have one coming up this week, actually. But yeah, just being able to connect with people in a different setting has been really freeing and refreshing. Being able to learn from others is definitely also really helpful, and helping people navigate to learn more about me and the work that I do. I had my first person book a consultation off of LinkedIn just this past week. And so I think I haven't said this explicitly, but another thing that was scary for me about being a business owner was when it was a side hustle, I operated 100% off of referrals, right? And so in the back of my head, it was like, okay, at some point, everybody that knows me is going to have referred somebody, right? So how do I still have business? How do I still cultivate new people and new leads? And that's definitely something that I learned both from our coaching and the sales intensive. And I'm already starting to see just differences with being asked to apply to certain RFPs, with having cold leads, people that I have no connection with reaching out to me. And so that has also just built a level of, you can breathe. It's going to be okay. Like there are always going to be people that need DEI work. And I think that a lot of people are scared right now because there is so much anti-DEI legislation happening nationwide. And so people have asked me, like, are you going to still do this? Like, how is it going to work? And I'm like, yeah, I am. There are still lots of people who need DEI work. And my target audience was never the folks who are still debating whether racism is real or debating whether white supremacy culture is a thing. I had to do that work when I was climbing the corporate ladder. Do not enjoy that work whatsoever. And so, when you're coming to me, you already have a level of understanding about race, racism, white supremacy culture. And there are always going to be those people, and those are the people that I'm hoping to work with. And LinkedIn has been a great space to cultivate and find those types of people.
Yeah. Um, I'm so glad that you're, some of the skills around like this, like from the sales intensive, right? About prospecting and targeting and finding the right people who are ready to work with you. I don't have bit time to work with folks who are still figuring out if they believe in this or not,
Right,
right?
right,
There is a body of folks who actually like, this is critical, and that's who you serve, right? You don't have to waste your time with having to convince anyone, because none of us should have to do that as DI
right,
consultants, really. But how do you then find those folks? And I'm really glad that you're be able to be proactive about it. I think when people are not think about sales, and this is pretty typical Vanity, right? When people are like, I'm mostly referral based, or and it's kind of, well, that's like that consistency and that stability. You're like, well, that's who knows when that's going to dry up, like you said.
right,
So I'm really glad that you were able to take away that, wait, I can control this more. Like I can
right,
actually be proactive and reach out to folks, and people want to talk to me. And even
right,
it's like one of the things that I remember you sharing in the intensive was like, I'm getting recognized now too,
right,
like in real, like in the wild.
right.
Right? Like you're
Right.
right. Do you want to share that a little bit about that before we wrap up here?
Yeah, so I'll say two things quickly. So one, I think sometimes when we think about entrepreneurship, we just think that it's going to be the hardest thing ever, right? Like I know I thought that it's just so hard. There's so many things I don't know. And while that's true, that's also true at any job. Like I remember anytime I would go to a new company, I would have butterflies the first couple of weeks. Like, how am I going to figure this out? Do I really know what I'm doing? And a lot of that is being a woman of color and second guessing yourself, but the work to get leads is so easy. Like it is actually not hard at all. You just have to email people and talk to people. And I am a relationship builder. So that's like, it's super easy. It's not, being in a 4-hour meeting with people who are on all different sides and you're trying to plan the meeting to get them to XYZ point. It's not, engaging with board members who are not aligned. Like there are so many things working at a nonprofit that were hard, that were draining, that were just toxic, right? And when I think about that in comparison to going to get some leads, like I would do that any day. I will email random strangers on LinkedIn, like, hey, you liked my post. Can we talk some more? That is so easy to do in comparison to some of the work that I was doing. But I had
Yeah.
this mismatch of, thinking I didn't know what I didn't know. So being a business owner must be hard. It must be impossible. Like I just had all of these messages in the back of my head. But to your other question, I was at a conference and, somebody randomly came up to me and was like, hey, I think I know you from LinkedIn. And and so she asked me about something that I posted. I'm like, oh yeah, that was me. She was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm meeting somebody famous. Can I give you a hug? And I was like, sure. It was really super sweet. But yeah, just being consistent and posting on LinkedIn. A year ago, I probably only posted on LinkedIn when I got a new job. And
Yep.
so it was
Yeah.
like that one, Vanity has a new job here, everybody congratulates you. But that was the only time I used LinkedIn. Whereas now I'm contributing thought leadership and strategies and techniques and personal stories that really, move people and have an impact on um, how people go about trying to implement DEI work in their own practices.
Yeah. I love that. I know the first time that kind of happened to me, when people were like recognizing me, and also coming from a place where I don't like social media, I don't like LinkedIn.
Right,
Like this is a lot for me to do, because people don't maybe see that from folks,
right,
right? Like,
right,
yeah, it's one, physical work, but two, emotionally, a lot of resistance. And yeah, it's come somewhat surreal and very sweet when people are like, hey, wait, I know you. And for me, that's what that has told me, is you're doing something that matters, right? That people are watching you, whether they're liking posts or not, right? That they're rooting you on, right? People aren't trying to drag you down. They're actually
Right,
rooting you on, and also being inspired by what you are doing, because maybe, well, that makes it accessible for me too. Like, you look like
right,
me, or you're just that person right here. I know you, right? You're not some guru or celebrity over there, right? You were like, I was following you for the last couple of years, and I saw the growth and how cool. And maybe that actually is possible for me too.
right, right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been such a pleasure, both having you in like as like coachee and programs and such, but also just I'm just glad to know you, and there's such a I don't know, the word that comes up for me when I'm speaking to you is brightness and joy. Like, it's and just ease, I think. So it doesn't surprise me that when you're like, entrepreneurship is easy. Or it's maybe not easy, but it's not this impossible thing,
Right, right,
right? It's figure outable, especially when you work with folks who can help you, right?
right,
Like, past things that you just don't know, right? And then you find your own groove, you find your own way. Uh, I love when you're like, wait, I'd rather do this and try to convince board members of anything. This
right,
is way
right.
easier just to go find some leads and reach out and do outreach, right? Um, and what was my point of that? And it's I have found that, as coaches and consultants, we're actually really good at sales, or we're actually really good at helping people. That's all this is, right?
Right.
Just taking that ability to listen deeply, right? Ask really good questions that help people make decisions. And just applying that skill set as a coach or consultant, like that's what we need to be as salespeople, as business owners, right?
Right.
So it's the same. So I'm glad that connection has been made, and you're like, oh, right? And just so going with that, and as we wrap up, would just love to hear more about, like, so what's next, right? What's next for you? Or what are you dreaming about? What does the liberatory future look like? And then also, how aside from LinkedIn, connecting with you on LinkedIn, how else can people find you, work with you, etc.?
Yeah, so I am actually launching another part of my business this July, where I'm going to be helping women of color who are introverts launch their business, because I do think there is something about being an introvert. I am very introverted, and post-COVID, before COVID, I was like 60-40, but post-COVID, I'm like 80-90% introverted. And so, to what I was sharing with you about the leads, before that sales intensive, I was like, there's no way I can ever sell anything. Like, I couldn't even sell Girl Scout cookies. And that's when I was a cute little kid knocking on people's doors, and people were like, what's wrong with this kid? Because I just have a lot of anxiety, right? And so the idea of selling in itself was just terrifying to me. And so I think that a lot of times as introverts, we get so stuck in our head. Another one of the things that Carissa helped me with was I had 4 different businesses that I wanted to run at once, right? And that's not the best way to start. And so I had to get out of my head, and she would, ask me, are you doing B2B or B2C? Like, which one are you focusing on first? And I was like, well, both. And she was like, okay, but you need to be really clear in your messaging. And so much of that is because I live in my head as an introvert. Like, my brain is constantly racing. I'm constantly thinking. And so I want to be able to help other introverts kind of put the different pieces of our brains aside so that we can, get started in launching a business. Because to your point, I do see it as a path towards liberation where I didn't before. And I thought I had also seen a lot of people who launch businesses like become the robber barons, right? And so it was like, you were about liberation and now you're like all about oppression. Like, how did that happen so quickly? And so I think that there is a way to launch really quality businesses in a liberatory framework, and think about how we can fight against capitalism with, taking our talents and our skills from those organizations who are bleeding us dry, from, corporate America who's bleeding us dry, and let them figure it out on their own while we're figuring out something else, a new path to freedom over here. So that's one of the things that I'm thinking about. As I mentioned, I also, have on my vision board a staff of 5 in the next 3 years. And I really want us to think about profit sharing in a different way. And so, my staff, I'm not going to pay anybody market rate because, like I said, the market isn't equitable. And so thinking about after we take care of the bills, the insurance, all of the in-house things, what profit sharing opportunities can we have for staff to make sure that we are all flourishing and doing well, not just, me at the top with the little worker bees at the bottom. That is not my style at all. So yeah, still thinking about that and reading a lot about, different business models who have taken that type of work on. And then to stay connected with me, you can follow me at Shifted Consulting on Instagram and on Facebook. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. I am most active on LinkedIn, but I do post on Instagram and Facebook as well. And if you are a BIPOC entrepreneur, highly recommend Carissa. She is phenomenal. And I wouldn't be here if I didn't randomly meet her on that day when I was like, well, I got to start a business because I'm not doing this anymore.
Spiritually
Yes,
guided over to
yes.
each other. Well, Vanny, like I said, it's been such a joy and pleasure to be working with you and to watch you, fly with your own wings now as your full-blown, full-time entrepreneur, and love to see all the different models now. Not that you can't run them all, just not all
Right.
at once and to start. And so love seeing just how expansive things are becoming as you continue to grow and evolve. And so for everyone else, thank you again so much for joining us. And, thanks again, Vanity. Built by BIPOC is a weekly show. We have replays of all of our events. They're available. We do them mostly on LinkedIn, and then they're also available, though, if you want to catch the replay, you weren't able to come on our YouTube channel. So always something going on here at Conscious Exchange, whether we're interviewing folks, we're doing some teaching, some master classes, just getting to have conversations with the community. I think that's what really building these businesses is all about. So with that, thank you all so much. See you next time, and let's go build our liberatory futures together. Bye.
Yes.